What happens when a beloved Oscar-winning actor sits down for what should be a simple morning chat, only to face an ambush that crosses every line of decency? It only took 43 seconds of Lorraine Kelly's condescending remarks before the atmosphere turned toxic, and what followed was a television meltdown that nobody saw coming. The studio lights were hot that morning. Anthony Hopkins settled into the bright orange sofa, his posture relaxed, ready for what he thought would be a friendly conversation about his latest film. Lorraine Kelly sat across from him, flanked by her regular panelists, fashion critic Miranda Hayes and entertainment reporter Duncan Ross. The audience applauded as the segment began. "Anthony, lovely to have you here," Lorraine said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Though I must say, I'm surprised you had time for us, little people." Hopkins chuckled politely, assuming it was banter. "Always happy to be here, Lorraine. Thanks for having me." "Right, well," Lorraine continued, leaning forward. "Let's talk about this new film of yours. Another one where you play a serious, brooding character. Do you ever get tired of being so predictable?" The audience went quiet. Miranda shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Hopkins maintained his composure, his smile faltering just slightly. "I wouldn't say predictable," he replied calmly. "I choose roles that challenge me as an actor." "Challenge you?" Lorraine laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the studio. "Anthony, you've been playing the same character for 30 years. Surely even you can admit that." Duncan Ross jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. "Lorraine, I think what Anthony brings to each role is—" "Duncan, please," Lorraine cut him off with a wave of her hand. "I'm trying to have an honest conversation here. Something this industry desperately needs." Hopkins sat straighter, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Lorraine, I'm not sure what you're getting at." "What I'm getting at," Lorraine said, her voice rising, "is that some of us work incredibly hard every single day to bring fresh content to our viewers. We don't just coast on past glory and expect everyone to bow down." Miranda's eyes widened. "Lorraine, maybe we should what, Miranda? Pretend like we're all starstruck? I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities, and I'm tired of tiptoeing around egos." Hopkins remained remarkably calm, though his jaw had tightened. "I've never asked anyone to tiptoe around anything. I came here to talk about my work." "Your work?" Lorraine repeated mockingly. "Let's talk about your work, then. This new film, it's what? Your third collaboration with the same director? Very cozy. Very safe. Do you ever take risks anymore? Or is that beneath someone of your stature?" The audience was completely silent now. The camera operators exchanged nervous glances. Duncan tried again. "The film has received incredible reviews," Duncan offered. "The critics are calling it—" "Duncan, for heaven's sake, I can read the press releases myself," Lorraine snapped. "I'm trying to get to the truth here." Hopkins placed his hands on his knees, his voice steady. "What truth is that, Lorraine?" "The truth," she said, pointing her finger at him, "is that actors like you take up all the oxygen in the room. You take roles that could go to younger, hungrier talent. You collect your paycheck, you do your press tour, and you move on. Meanwhile, the rest of us are out here grinding." "I wasn't aware we were competing," Hopkins said quietly. "Of course you weren't," Lorraine shot back. "That's exactly the problem. You float above it all in your little bubble while the rest of us—" "Lorraine," Miranda interrupted, her voice firm now. "This is completely inappropriate." Lorraine whipped around to face her. "Excuse me? This is my show, Miranda. I'll decide what's appropriate." "This isn't journalism," Miranda said. "This is just mean." "Mean?" Lorraine laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about mean? Let's talk about an industry that worships the same 10 people while thousands of talented individuals can't get a foot in the door." Hopkins stood up slowly, beginning to remove his microphone. "I think I should go." "Oh, wonderful," Lorraine said, standing as well. "Run away That's what people like you do when faced with real questions. Real questions? Hopkins' voice remained calm, but had an edge now. You haven't asked me a single real question. You've spent the last several minutes attacking me for reasons I don't understand. Duncan stood up too, positioning himself slightly between them. Anthony, please, I'm sure Lorraine didn't mean— Don't speak for me, Duncan, Lorraine interjected. I meant every word. Hopkins finished removing his microphone and handed it to a nearby crew member. Thank you for your time. That's it? Lorraine called after him. You're just going to leave? He paused, turning back to face her. What would you have me do, Lorraine? Engage in whatever this is? I came here in good faith. Good faith, she scoffed. You came here for publicity. For your film. To sell tickets. Of course, Hopkins said simply. That's what press tours are for. But I also came here with respect for you and your show. Clearly, that was a mistake. The audience gasped. Miranda put her head in her hands. Duncan looked desperately at the producers off camera. A mistake? Lorraine's face flushed red. How dare you? Do you know how many people would kill to be on this show? Then perhaps you should invite them instead, Hopkins replied. People you actually want to talk to. So people you respect. I respect people who earn it, Lorraine shot back. And I haven't? Hopkins asked, his voice dangerously quiet now. 40 years in this industry, and I haven't earned basic courtesy? 40 years of the same performance, Lorraine said viciously. 40 years of taking up space. Miranda stood up abruptly. That's enough, Lorraine. This has gone too far. Sit down, Miranda, Lorraine ordered. No, Miranda said firmly. I won't sit here and watch you bully a guest. Anthony, I'm so sorry. It's quite all right, Hopkins said graciously. You've been nothing but professional. Lorraine's eyes blazed. Professional? She works for me. This is my show. Then maybe you should start acting like a host instead of a prosecutor, Hopkins said. The words hung in the air. The studio fell completely silent, except for the hum of the cameras. Get out, Lorraine said, her voice low and shaking. I was already leaving, Hopkins reminded her gently. No, I'm kicking you out, Lorraine insisted, as if she needed to maintain some illusion of control. You're no longer welcome on my show. I never was, apparently, Hopkins said. He turned to Duncan and Miranda. Best of luck to both of you. Duncan nodded, looking miserable. Miranda gave him a small, sympathetic smile. This is unbelievable, Lorraine muttered, pacing now. The arrogance. The absolute arrogance. Hopkins paused at the edge of the stage. Lorraine, I genuinely hope whatever is troubling you gets better. Nobody should carry that much anger. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me, Lorraine snarled. You don't know anything about me. You're right, Hopkins agreed. I don't. Just as you clearly don't know anything about me, despite spending the last 10 minutes making assumptions. I know enough, Lorraine said. I know your type. My type, Hopkins repeated softly. And what type is that? The type that thinks they're above everyone else. The type that expects constant praise and admiration. I've asked for neither, Hopkins said. I simply expected a civil conversation. Duncan finally found his voice. Anthony, please, if you could just stay. I'm sure we can— Duncan, stop groveling, Lorraine snapped. Let him go. I'm not groveling, Duncan protested. I'm trying to salvage something from this disaster. Disaster? Lorraine rounded on him. The only disaster here is that I've wasted my time on someone who can't handle honest criticism. That wasn't criticism, Miranda said quietly. That was cruelty. You're fired, Lorraine said suddenly, pointing at Miranda. The audience audibly gasped. Several people stood up. The producers were frantically gesturing from off camera. You can't fire me on air, Miranda said, shocked. I just did, Lorraine replied. Pack your things. Hopkins shook his head slowly. This is extraordinary. What's extraordinary, Lorraine said, turning her fury back to him, is your ego. You can't even comprehend that maybe, just maybe, you're not as special as you think you are. I never claimed to be special, Hopkins said tiredly. I'm just an actor doing my job. Your job, Lorraine mocked. Standing in front of a camera and reciting lines someone else wrote. Such noble work. It's the work I love, Hopkins said simply. Well, go love it somewhere else, Lorraine said. We're done here. We were done the moment I sat down, Hopkins observed. You had no intention of having a real interview, did you? Lorraine crossed her arms. I had every intention of having a real interview, but that requires a guest willing to be honest. About what? Hopkins asked, genuinely puzzled now. What is it you wanted me to say? I wanted you to admit that you're overrated, Lorraine said bluntly. That your success is as much about luck and timing as it is about talent. The audience erupted in shocked murmurs. Duncan's mouth fell open. Miranda stood frozen. Hopkins took a long breath. I see. Well, Lorraine, I'm sorry I can't give you what you want. Whether I'm overrated or not isn't for me to say. I just do my work to the best of my ability. How very diplomatic, Lorraine sneered. What would you prefer? Self-flagellation? Should I list all my failures and insecurities for your entertainment? I'd prefer honesty, Lorraine insisted. I've been nothing but honest, Hopkins countered. You just don't like my answers. Your answers are rehearsed, Lorraine accused. Everything about you is rehearsed. I'm an actor, Hopkins said with a slight smile. What did you expect? There it is, Lorraine pounced. That smug superiority. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I wasn't being smug, Hopkins said, his smile fading. I was making a small joke to try and ease the tension. Don't try to manipulate this situation, Lorraine warned. Manipulate? Hopkins looked genuinely bewildered now. Lorraine, I have no idea what's happening here. What's happening, Lorraine said, stepping closer, is that I'm calling you out. Someone needs to. Everyone else just fawns over you. And you've appointed yourself to that role? Hopkins asked. Someone has to do it, Lorraine said. Someone has to puncture the balloon. Hopkins studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. What did I do to you, Lorraine? What is this really about? This isn't about me, Lorraine protested. This is about accountability. Accountability for what? Hopkins pressed. For being an actor? For having a career? No, for accepting roles I'm offered? For being mediocre and getting away with it? Lorraine said viciously. The audience gasped again. Duncan put his hand over his face. Miranda looked like she might cry. Hopkins nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning. I see. Well, thank you for clarifying. That's all you have to say? Lorraine demanded. What would you like me to say? Hopkins asked. Would you like me to argue? To defend myself? To prove my worth to you? I'd like you to be real for once, Lorraine said. I am being real, Hopkins said quietly. This is as real as it gets. I'm standing here, confused, and honestly a bit hurt, wondering what I did to deserve this treatment. Oh, please, Lorraine rolled her eyes. You're not hurt. People like you don't get hurt. People like me, Hopkins repeated. You keep saying that. Who are people like me, Lorraine? Successful people, rich people, famous people, people who have everything handed to them. Handed to me, Hopkins said softly. Right. The 40 years of work, the training, the failures, the rejections, the struggle, all handed to me. Spare me the sob story, Lorraine said dismissively. It's not a sob story, Hopkins said. It's just the truth. Nobody hands you a career. You build it piece by piece. How inspirational, Lorraine mocked. Should I get you a trophy? Hopkins shook his head. You know what? I'm done. I truly am leaving now. Finally, Lorraine said. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Hopkins walked toward the exit, his dignity intact despite everything. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or remain silent. Most chose silence. Just before he left the stage, he turned back one last time. Lorraine, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. Truly. But I don't think it's in tearing other people down. Save your wisdom for your acting classes, Lorraine called after him. He paused, then continued walking. The cameras caught every step. The audience watched in stunned disbelief. Miranda grabbed her bag and followed Hopkins off the stage. Duncan sat frozen in his chair, looking lost. Lorraine stood alone in the center of the stage, breathing heavily, her face flushed. "Well," she said to the silent audience, "that was exciting, wasn't it?" Nobody responded. The silence was deafening. "Fine," Lorraine said, trying to regain control. "Let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back with—" "We're still live," Duncan said quietly, pointing to the cameras. Lorraine's eyes widened as she realized the full extent of what had just happened. Every word, every insult, every cruel comment had been broadcast. "Cut to commercial," she hissed at the crew. But the damage was already done. The interview that was supposed to be a simple promotional chat had turned into something else entirely. Something ugly. Something that revealed far more about the host than the guest. Hopkins was already in his car by the time the producers managed to cut the feed. Miranda sat in the green room, shaking with adrenaline. Duncan remained on the stage, wondering how his normally professional show had devolved into chaos. And Lorraine stood there, alone, as the reality of what she had done began to sink in. The audience filed out quietly. The crew avoided eye contact. The bright orange sofa suddenly looked garish under the hot studio lights. "That went well," she muttered to herself, trying for humor that nobody was there to hear. In the car, Hopkins sat quietly, processing what had happened. His publicist was already calling, panic in her voice. The studio was calling. Everyone was calling. But Hopkins just sat there, looking out the window, wondering what possesses someone to attack a stranger so viciously. What pain they must be in. What insecurity drives that kind of behavior? He felt sorry for her in the end. Not angry, not vindictive, just sad that someone could harbor so much resentment toward a person they didn't even know. Back at the studio, Lorraine retreated to her dressing room. Her phone was already exploding with messages. Her producers were demanding to speak with her. The network executives were on their way. But in that moment, alone in her dressing room, looking at herself in the mirror, Lorraine had to confront what she had done. And more importantly, why she had done it. The answer wasn't comfortable. It never is when we're forced to look at our worst selves. The makeup artists packed up their supplies. The crew dismantled the set. Duncan gave a brief, uncomfortable apology to the audience members who remained. Miranda called her agent. And somewhere across town, Anthony Hopkins poured himself a cup of tea and decided that some days, the best response to cruelty is simply to walk away with grace. Because responding to anger with anger only creates more anger. Responding to cruelty with cruelty only creates more cruelty. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's bitterness. The next morning, the clip would be everywhere. Millions would watch Lorraine Kelly's meltdown. Think pieces would be written. Apologies would be demanded. Consequences would follow. But in that immediate aftermath, in those quiet moments after the storm, Hopkins simply sat with his tea and thought about how strange it all was. How a simple interview could reveal so much about human nature. About insecurity and projection. About the masks we wear and the pain we carry. He thought about how Lorraine had looked, standing alone on that stage, realizing what she had done. He almost felt worse for her than he did for himself, because he would move on. He would do other interviews, make other films, continue his life. But she would have to live with what she had revealed about herself, not just to the world, but to herself. The interview had started so normally. The morning producers had briefed Hopkins on the format. light questions about his film, maybe a funny anecdote, a discussion about his process. Nothing unusual, nothing to worry about. When he first walked onto that stage, the audience had cheered. They were excited to see him. Some had waited hours for tickets. They came expecting entertainment, maybe some insight into the creative process. Instead, they witnessed something that made them deeply uncomfortable. One audience member would later describe the atmosphere as shifting from warm to Arctic in seconds. The moment Lorraine made that first cutting remark, something changed. The air got thicker. People stopped smiling. Miranda had known something was wrong immediately. She had worked with Lorraine for 3 years and had never seen her like this. Usually, Lorraine was bubbly, energetic, maybe a bit pushy with questions, but never mean. This was different. This was personal, even though it made no sense. Duncan had tried so hard to salvage the situation. He kept jumping in with positive observations, trying to redirect the conversation. But Lorraine shut him down every time. It was like she was determined to destroy the interview, to humiliate Hopkins in front of everyone. The crew in the control room had been frantically messaging the floor director. Should they cut to commercial? Should they intervene? But how do you stop a live interview when the host is having a meltdown? Hopkins had remained so calm throughout. Unnaturally calm, some might say. But that was decades of training. Decades of learning to control his emotions, to stay present in difficult moments. Every uncomfortable scene he had ever performed prepared him for this, in a way. When Lorraine had called him predictable, he had felt a flash of irritation. Of course he felt it. Who wouldn't? But he pushed it down, stayed professional, assumed she was just trying to be provocative for the cameras. When she called him mediocre, that hurt more. Not because he believed it, but because it was so unnecessarily cruel, so deliberately designed to wound. That was when he knew this wasn't just bad interviewing. This was something else. The moment he decided to leave was when she said he took up space. That phrase. So dismissive, so contemptuous, as if his entire career, his entire life's work, was somehow an inconvenience to others. He had spent 40 years trying to do good work, trying to bring stories to life, trying to honor the craft, and to have someone reduce all of that to taking up space, it was too much. So he stood. He removed his microphone. He prepared to leave with whatever dignity he could muster. But Lorraine couldn't even let him have that. She had to chase him, had to get the last word, had to maintain the illusion that she was in control, that she was making him leave rather than him choosing to go. Miranda's decision to follow him had surprised everyone, including Miranda herself. But she couldn't sit there anymore. Couldn't be complicit in what was happening. Sometimes you have to draw a line. When Lorraine fired her on air, Miranda had felt a strange sense of relief, because it meant she was free. Free from whatever toxic energy had possessed her boss that day. Free to maintain her own integrity. Duncan stayed because Duncan always stayed. He was loyal to a fault. He believed in the show, in what it could be. And he hoped, somehow, that this was just an aberration. That tomorrow Lorraine would apologize and everything would go back to normal. But deep down, he knew nothing would be normal again. The audience members who were there would tell their friends, their families. Social media would explode. The story would grow and mutate. Details would be added and subtracted, but the core of it would remain. A beloved actor treated cruelly for no apparent reason. Hopkins sat in his car and thought about all the interviews he had done over the years. Thousands of them. Some good, some boring, some awkward. But never anything like this. Never such open hostility from someone he had just met. He wondered if Lorraine had personal issues with him. Maybe she had auditioned for something he got. Maybe she knew someone who didn't like him. Maybe she was just having the worst day of her life and he happened to be there. Or maybe it was something deeper. Maybe she resented what he represented. Success, longevity, recognition. Maybe his very presence reminded her of something she wanted but didn't have. The human mind works in mysterious ways. We project our pain onto others. We lash out at strangers because we can't lash out at the real source of our frustration. Hopkins understood this intellectually, but emotionally it still stung. His publicist was already doing damage control, reaching out to reporters, crafting statements, trying to get ahead of the story. But Hopkins had told her to keep it simple. Just say he left because the interview became untenable. Don't attack Lorraine. Don't speculate about her motives. Don't add fuel to the fire. Take the high road. Always take the high road. Even when people drag you through the mud, you don't have to roll around in it with them. Back at the studio, Lorraine was facing a different kind of reckoning. Her producers were livid, not just because of the PR nightmare, but because she had lost control. She had let her personal feelings, whatever they were, overtake her professional responsibilities. The network executives arrived within the hour, grim-faced, tight-lipped, ready to discuss consequences. Lorraine tried to explain herself, tried to justify what she had done. But the words rang hollow even to her own ears. She had bullied a guest on live television, in front of thousands of viewers. There was no spinning that. The show's sponsors were already calling, concerned about their brand association, wondering if they should pull their ads. The Twitter trending topics were brutal. Clips of the interview were being shared millions of times, and the comments were overwhelmingly in Hopkins' favor. Because people recognized authenticity when they saw it. They saw a man being attacked and maintaining his dignity. They saw a host losing control and revealing something ugly inside herself. Public opinion is fickle, but it's not stupid. Miranda packed her desk that evening. She had worked hard for this job, but she didn't regret walking away. Some things matter more than career advancement. Duncan stayed late, trying to plan for tomorrow's show, trying to figure out how to move forward. The guests who were scheduled were calling, asking if they should still come. The atmosphere was toxic now, and Lorraine sat in her dressing room, watching the clips circulate online, seeing herself through other people's eyes for the first time. She looked cruel. She looked unhinged. She looked like everything she had always despised in others. The irony was not lost on her. Hopkins went home that night and had dinner with his family. He told them about the interview. They were shocked, sympathetic, angry on his behalf. But he wasn't angry. Not anymore. He was just tired. Tired of the game, the performance, the constant need to present yourself in just the right way to satisfy people you don't know. He loved acting. He loved the work. But the rest of it, the publicity, the interviews, the pretending, he could do without it. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe it was time to step back. Do less press. Focus on the craft and let the work speak for itself. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Entertainment news, mainstream news, international news. Everyone had an opinion. Some defended Lorraine, saying she was just asking tough questions. But those voices were drowned out by the majority who saw it for what it was. A hit piece, an ambush, an attack. Hopkins declined to comment further. He let his publicist handle the statements. He had said everything he needed to say in that studio. Walking away with grace was statement enough. Lorraine issued an apology. A carefully worded, APR-approved apology that took responsibility while also trying to save face. It satisfied no one. Because apologies only mean something when they come from genuine remorse. When they come from understanding what you did wrong and why it was wrong. This apology felt hollow, performative, damage control rather than genuine contrition. Miranda found a new job within a week. Better pay, better atmosphere, better boss. Sometimes losing something forces you into something better. Duncan stayed with the show, But the dynamic had changed. The trust was gone. The easy chemistry that made the show work had evaporated, and Hopkins moved on, as he always did. Another experience added to a lifetime of experiences. Another reminder that people are complicated and unpredictable. He bore no grudge, held no resentment. Just filed it away as one of those strange moments that happen in a public life. But he never forgot Lorraine's face when she realized what she had done. That moment of clarity. That flash of horror. Because that's when he knew she wasn't a villain. She was just a person who made a terrible choice and had to live with it. And that, more than any apology or consequence, was the real story. Not the confrontation itself, but what it revealed about human nature, about how quickly things can spiral, about how our worst selves can emerge when we're not paying attention. The interview became a case study in broadcasting schools, an example of how not to conduct yourself as a host, how personal feelings can destroy professional credibility. But for Hopkins, it was just another day, another strange encounter in a career full of them. He went back to work, back to the craft he loved, back to bringing characters to life and telling stories that mattered, because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Focus on what we can control. Let go of what we can't. Treat people with kindness, even when they don't deserve it, and walk away from toxicity with our heads held high.